Hey Scott,
Hey Marty.
how's it going, bud?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Let's get right into it. So we were talking last time about the symbolic, and the symbolic is basically our language, our society, our culture, all the rules of it, the laws, all the ways in which we pardon me, our relationships with other people and other things in our environment. And so, what we were saying was that the symbolic is not at one with itself, which basically means that it was for the purpose of identifying or for orienting us to, our world, so that it gives us the names and the identities of the people and the things in our environment. So, in accord with evolutionary biology's idea that we are prediction machines, it helps to reduce the uncertainty of the world so that we can navigate some pretty complex interactions with it. But the problem is that there are times when we go to orient ourselves to the environment, to name the person in some kind of a way in front of us, or to identify whoever they are. And there's just this way in which we see that, all the ways which we've been taught to negotiate social, cultural norms and rules and laws, they fail. And we cannot figure out, why or how, but, we find ourselves in a situation where our identifiers aren't identifying. And there's something about our environment that we would call maybe irreducibly ambiguous. So we can't reduce the uncertainty, we can't reduce the ambiguity of our environment with the symbolic that we've been given. And so for Lacan, this is called the real, but we're not going to use that term because it's a horrible, confusing term. So we're just going to talk about irreducible ambiguity. So all that means is that the symbolic is not at one with itself. It cannot, in an A for A way, name everything, in your environment and everything in you, because there's also irreducible ambiguity, what sometimes is called in existentialism and phenomenology, otherness in yourself, so that the other can't be made familiar through the symbolic, basically, is what irreducible ambiguity is.
Yeah, and another term that we brought up from Lacan was we talked about the big other, and the big
Mm.
other is an effect of this symbolic um, universe that makes us try to create that coherence, to want to like see it as perfectly continuous and smooth, and that there's no breakdowns or that like kind of cover over that not at oneness or that irreducible
Yes,
ambiguity,
yeah.
right?
The big other
And
is the guarantee that the symbolic works.
yeah, and so if the symbolic is like it kind of always like masking this like part of the part of the symbolic itself, which is that irreducible ambiguity. And so and one of the things that we do to is part of like the big other is to create have a drive to create like a meta language, and
Mm.
which is like a language that is would give us some kind of like timeless like uh type of discourse that could kind of transcend any changes in the symbolic and would like be one set of like signs or like symbols to kind of rule them all.
Stories as well, yeah. Right, exactly. So like, and then, in modern times, really the guaranteer, the big other, of like all the shiftiness and confusion of the symbolic, is, scientific discourse. Especially, we want the truth, so that we don't have to deal with all this ambiguity. We don't have to deal with all this otherness. And so, like, the way we, get the truth is through scientific discourse, because it's believed to be objective, third person verifiable, to, be able to reduce all the vagaries to like what's real and what's actually going on and what's actually happening. And so like it becomes like for some people at any rate this like meta language that can resolve whatever sort of like confusion the symbolic gets itself into. And so it's just kind of a correspondence theory of truth that the scientific method seems to offer, which means that whatever you say actually corresponds to what actually is, so that there's like this A for A identification between language and reality. It
Right.
discloses reality correctly. It corresponds to the truth of reality. That's what correspondence theory of truth is.
Right. And one of I think a good example of where this shows up, Marty, is like something we've talked about a lot, but in this area of trying to kind of like in our society determine what a man and a woman truly are, like the real man and real woman.
Right. Quite the hot
Um,
topic, right? Right. For the last couple of years. Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
yes. So and I think what we find in this is that really science cannot resolve this issue, right?
Right.
And so
But
we
we
see
wanted to.
that
We desperately
we
wanted
would,
to.
yeah, we desperately
Yeah.
wanted to because we feel like, and each side feels like they have science on their side and they have the truth on their side, right? And there's like, if only the other side could just see that, the science is on their side. And so, I mean, I think you can see this especially like with the picking of choosing of the scientific discourse that's being used. And we see like on basically if you take two sides of like whether you're, as you see men as potentially including trans men, right? And women as including trans women, we call that the trans inclusive position. And so if it when you use this discourse and when we talk about someone's sex assigned at birth, and so that person's
Hmm.
sex assigned at birth doesn't determine their sex or their sexual identity necessarily. Like there that in some cases, the person, when we call them a cisgendered person, their sex assigned at birth does match up with their gender identity and their sexual assignment. But when the person sex assigned at birth does not, then they can be, a trans person, and so in the trans inclusive position, we would say this is, a man or a woman. It has nothing to do with like how they were, what their assignment was at birth. Like that's not essential to being a man or being a woman. It's like that whatever that fact is. But then on the sort of trans exclusive view, they really want to focus on the what they would call a biological sex. So they want to say like, oh, but this person has the genitals, or this person has some kind of sex characteristics that make them truly a man, and that they can never succeed in becoming a woman. Or same with like the trans man could never succeed in being other than a woman, in becoming a man, because they have that some kind of biological marker that makes them truly that. And so both sides are using scientific discourse, and you can, argue one is consistent and one's not consistent or whatever. And but the fact of the matter is, it's like the scientific discourse itself cannot resolve this question. What does resolve this question is our values, right? Like whether we want to include trans people or we don't want to include trans people. And those values come like from like they come from someplace deep in us, right? They come from our unconscious. They come from the big
Mm.
other. They come from the abyss of meaning, the this ambiguous this ambiguous place that we will never see the bottom of, because they are something core to what we believe. And so this attempt to create a meta language that actually solves this will, in fact, never solve it, and really will just obscure and cover over the fact that there is something deep and abysmal in our, like, in human sexuality, and that cannot be reduced to any one discourse.
The part of why, we like this book so much is because there is a sort of way, which the Khan talks about, but we'll talk maybe more about it in Ziporyn's terms, of enjoying not having a meta language, of enjoying not having something that resolves, all these kinds of disputes, of enjoying all the difference that can grow up when you don't have an identity. So that if you have, this like essence, like, searching for an essence or whatever, this ultimate, what something is without any ambiguity. You reduce a lot of joy in your life, so that there is this idea, at any rate, that you can, have this, intention that reduces, ambiguity about things, by being able to identify and say what everything is. And that's why people enjoy, sometimes, ambiguously, but enjoy the big other, because the big other can do this for them. But
Right.
like,
And especially like the guys that we're going to be talking about, right, in this
yeah,
section, which is, our
right.
atheist four
Uh,
horsemen or
right,
three
yeah.
horsemen of the, yeah,
Yeah, they want it to tell them, what things are. Because as you're going to see with each example, because it reduces a certain type of ambiguity, in a way that like seems to resolve, uncertainty, in all kinds of different ways. Maybe I guess we should just get into that, but, I'll just say one last thing, like just so far as Ziporyn, if you have like, one intention, it's kind of like having like this ultimate big other that gets to say who belongs and who doesn't, that gets to say, what
right.
something is. And then, it can't accommodate the pushback of like, well, why am I what you say that I am? Like, I get to say who I am. That kind of a thing, is the I don't know, is the problem with having a all-encompassing, intention that maps out the
Absolutely.
whole world or whatever. Or, it basically is disavowing that the symbolic is not at one with itself. It's saying that it is, and that there is no gap, there is no, irreducible ambiguity or whatever.
Yeah.
Ziporyn would definitely say there's no, um, there's no problem with having intentions and purposes and, whatever, identifications, but holding them, loosely and not to the exclusion of others. He's got a great, concept called inter-subsumption that we'll get into later. But some guys who don't know how to do that are the new atheists. And just to kind of start off, as Ziporyn, talks about, Richard Dawkins, and how, for him, he obviously is a material reductionist, and so he has this sort of idea that, third person verifiability, is the ultimate ground. Falsifiability is the ultimate ground, for truth, and like what can, be called, real. So that you have this idea in Dawkins of the selfish gene, where, whatever else comes up in society and culture, whatever, it's really a disguised intention, for the gene to reproduce itself, and to, persist in, the kind of survival and reproduction kind of mode of natural selection. So that like whatever is because, this gene was able to survive and reproduce, and so that, like you can look at any behavior, you can look at any, a cultural norm, you can look at the way you see the world and see that it has some relation to evolutionary advantage. And that's, why the world is the way it is. And so like you can understand, the truth. So somebody is dancing, and it seems like they're just enjoying it for dance sake, and they're enjoying it as like just this frivolous, fun activity. But really, what's really going on, and that is that it has something to do with, attracting a mate and reproduction or something along those lines, so that things can always
Yeah.
be reduced. You have the key to reality. You know what what's really going on all the time.
Right. That's your meta language, right? That's your this one discourse that can explain it all and kind of reduce all that ambiguity down to
All their
like a simple
discourses, yeah.
formula. So like and another that I'll take the second guy, which is like Sam Harris, which Ziporyn mentions that he likes something one thing in particular about Sam Harris, who is also a material reductionist. There's another term that is often used with like this kind of like attempt to use scientific rationality to kind of boil down reality to the most basic truth. And um, Sam Harris, the thing he likes about Sam Harris is that he's not completely anti-religious. So he carves out an exception for Buddhism, and as like a no self philosophy that encourages meditation. He believes that like the whole like philosophy behind it has like the potential and has some kind of empirically verifiable benefit to human beings that will like that.
Which is what gives it value, right?
Yeah, with what gives it value. Right, right. And it's like why we decide that's valuable, is a whole nother thing, right? I mean, it's just like our point here is like, why is that? How can science determine that that is valuable? Like, why should
Yeah, it's
humans
the ground of
flourishing be
anything that's active, all value, right? Yeah, and and
um,
like meditating makes you more productive and blah blah blah. So it's just sort of like reduction to economic
right,
efficiency and like
right.
productive, like value in that regard. What does it produce?
Right. And we decide it's like, yeah, we decided that that's about a value for us. And so of course that's you're going to like use your formula to say this is truly valuable because we can prove it with science that it's like actually making us like more productive and able to get more done in a day.
Yeah,
Um,
which is weird because it's a no self kind of a manifestation that Saporn will talk about, throughout the book. But it's like this weird use of no self to where like I'm gonna go like not have a self so that my self is optimized when I get back or something like that. It's like I have no idea. But that's the sort of idea at any rate. So, and again,
yeah,
like so, like the two pillars. I don't know if we explicitly mentioned this yet, but like that, Scott and I are kind of using to orient ourselves here to Eastern religion is this Buddhist no self, and we'll get way more into that later. But like it also, Ziporyn talks about in Taoism, the purposeless. Well, Wu Wei, which is purposeless action, which I like to call intentionless intention. But again, you can fall into the same trap with Wu Wei if it becomes this thing that you do in order to do things better. So like there's a way of having an intention that is just for nothing, which is what we want, and then there's a way of having it that's for use, value, or whatever. And Sam Harris would be somebody who, again would, have an idea around this. But this is something that he doesn't explicitly promote, but in religion, the idea of like having an intention and putting it out there and letting go of it and like, the secret and all these kinds of things where, your intention to not have an intention becomes somehow productive. And again,
right.
you can do that. That's not a problem. It's just that that's not, you can just see how this shows that the meta language hasn't gone anywhere.
That's right. And then we have the our last guy, Christopher Hitchens, who is totally anti-religious and in some ways like more stylized, more stylish, and so from that perspective, he gives us more flair a little bit, but
Mhm.
it's still kind of the same, the same story. It's like religion is bad because it's created all kinds of horrors in the world and it's led to most like human suffering. And so like again, we like It's like if we're going to truly value, I mean, it's this like very like humanistic like
Right. Secular
perspective,
humanism
secular humanist.
is like the real, value here because secular humanism can be justified through some sort of utilitarian analysis or economic analysis of like, like what's actually good for people or whatever, what the good
Yeah,
is. You can find out, you don't have to argue about the good. You can like come to it, by, figuring out, what a secular humanist values, I suppose. But it becomes, once again, it's a meta language. So you critique religion, which is fine. And I actually agree with most of his Christopher Hitchenson's he's passed now, but critiques of religion. So like I'm totally with, the religious zealot, causing war as a problem. I have
yeah,
no
same.
problem say
Yeah,
with any of that stuff. And but or even back to Sam Harris, I don't have any problem with people using meditation to be more productive or whatever. Like we're not saying that. We're just saying that these are ways in which you use a meta language, a meta narrative, a set of values that you think are, solid because they have somehow gotten rid of this irreducible ambiguity that the rest of us have to
right.
deal with. Like
Yeah, because
so go
yeah, we
ahead.
have this idea that it's like we could just use the scientific method to kind of figure out what is true and therefore what if what's true should be what's valuable, right? I mean, only makes sense. Like if we could just orient ourselves to the truth through scientific verifiability, then we could
Mm.
somehow like create a very rational like ethics, right? We could presumably kind of figure out what's best for human beings and live this out.
Yeah, and blotting and by this rational work, we're blotting out the irrational. And so, so like what's happening here is like there's this preference being made for, what we're
Well,
calling rational or whatever, and there's this like othering, I suppose, of the irrational or whatever.
right, but I mean, it's not. I guess it's like maybe not entirely just right to say irrational as far as like extra rational is like the where our values come from is not necessarily like a place of rationality. It's more like a place of
Oh yeah, no, I
like
agree
a
with that. I was
feeling
just
of passion of like unconscious of like
yeah,
from the big other through
right, yeah,
like we are we do not determine those things. We cannot rationally determine what we
right, right,
value and not
right.
value.
Totally, yeah. So that would be the corrective. And I was just saying
Yeah,
I was trying to articulate better like what like a secular humanist who like values, you know, rationality and, scientific verifiability, like what, their idea is like, the progress of reason is to blot out,
yeah. The
yeah,
the
like that
stuff
from
that's
their perspective.
ambiguous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
all the
yeah,
good
right.
stuff.
Yeah, all the good stuff,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Which of course
But
is
we
it
don't,
was
right.
the romantic reaction, all that stuff was against that sort of a thing. But anyways, go ahead.
And I was going to say, we don't want to, like, obviously, like, we love science. I love science.
Yeah,
Marty loves
right.
science,
Peace.
right? We are, like, totally believe that, science is an important way for us to, like, we should orient ourselves with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
toward things that, like, we can verify scientifically, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
just like, I think that for me, it's like, we shouldn't think that it is like going to solve our questions of our value question, what really matters.
Right. And just, with the idea here of no self and with Wu Wei. So, I mean, no self is like an ultimate rejection of a totalizing identity. And then Wu Wei is our purposeless action is a rejection of well the doer of an action, but like a self at any rate that is in control of the action, so that the ground of any possible self, the ground of any possible action, the ground of any possible intention is intentionlessness, is purposelessness, is did we use the word void? But like, anyways,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Abyss.
it
Yeah.
is the abyss.
We're getting to Nietzsche like soon, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah. So understanding that those things, any purpose, is that you tried to hold on to, or any identity that you tried to hold on to past it's and make it super solid, like you want, and try to blot out every bit of ambiguity. That's the problem. It's not a problem to have an identity, or to have a purpose. It's just as long as you acknowledge, especially with the self, and again, to acknowledge that your self is conflicted. You have many different selves, and they they should be able to,
in the world
be
itself is
be
conflicted, right?
yeah,
Like it's
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And so like what we're
yeah.
trying to do is like learn techniques for those things to exist together within us, and in the world as well. And I think we should end by saying, like, um, the last part of the sections that we're covering today is called like the brain tumor part. What was that called?
Yeah, let's presume a
So
brain tumor.
less from brain tumor. So we'll finish off with this. Ziporyn is saying, like, look, like in the discourse between science and religion, the science guys are trying to blot out religion. They're trying to give all these good reasons why religion is a total disaster, and they're all good reasons, believe me. But like but they're trying to establish it as like, no, but here is the way. Here is the way of seeing the world. And it's kind of funny, in the example of the brain tumor that he uses, and then we'll talk about biblical literalism as well. But Ziporyn's point is like, look, if you tell somebody, your religion is based on, hallucinations, brain damage, a brain tumor, like you think you talk to God, but it's really got this medical explanation or whatever. Like it's not going to convince any religious person that that's what it actually is, and there's no reason why it should actually. The religious person is just going to say, well, look, God speaks through brain tumors, or whatever. That's the point of the brain tumor thing. And again, with
You
the
know?
and another reaction against hyper scientific, um, I don't know, push towards the elimination of all mystery and ambiguity from the world. You wind up with a kind of interesting reaction like biblical literalism, which is this like this almost insane like reaction in which you try to make the Bible scientific somehow, or like independently verifiable or provable. But you can see that you could just do this all day long, if you're not careful. And so
Yeah.
like there's no,
Well,
which is why
it,
Sephora is talking about inter-subsumption rather than like one side blotting out the other, because this is just not going to go anywhere.
yeah, I mean, you see this with biblical literalism, where there's little an attempt to say not only is the Bible like the inerrant word of God, but like even specific translations were like the actual words spoken to the translators, like to translate these ancient languages.
Right, yeah.
And so it just gets like really, really wild. But it's like it's really actually the same kind of impulse, which is if we can eliminate ambiguity, we can
Right,
know what the truth is, and then we have this roadmap. We can know what's right and what's wrong, what's true. God said
right,
this.
yeah.
God said this, and the translator translated it. God inspired that translator and to put those words in English exactly the right translation to get us to understand what they were, how they were written in
Or,
the
or, or,
original
or that they
language.
are or even more extreme, they are the literal words that God spoke,
Yeah,
which is a claim, in certain, not only, obviously people know that that's the claim, for the Quran and Islam, but that's also, the claim, like, as for Christians in certain ways as well. When Christians misunderstand, how the Bible was written.
right.
So that, you get all kinds of. It's not to say that, and again, I don't think it's because science disproves it, or the historical critical method like undermines all that. That's all fine. But it's just that I think you can still have the historical critical method alongside religiousness, and they can inter-subsume each other rather than blot one out. In this meta language move of like one intention to rule all the others, or like one, like meta language or meta narrative to rule all the others.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, there's a line in this book, Zarathustra, where, you know, Zarathustra talks about drinking the old wine and the new wine. It's like sometimes we do
Yeah.
need to drink from the ancient texts to get truth, right? And then
Hmm.
sometimes like we need the new, we need both, right? We need to
Yeah.
be able to hold all of these things in ourselves.
Yeah. So yeah, I think those are the three sections we wanted to cover today.
Yeah. All
Um,
right. I think we did it.